Yeah, this is really not the best time to do this for multiple reasons. Um, First off, how my voice sounds. Secondly, the light behind me. Um, but this isn't really about views or the best state that this video can be in. This is about me needing to get this information out. Um, One of the main reasons personally why I'm willing to take on this uh, challenge of being out here on the internet. Um, is I mean, there's many reasons to do it, but one of the reasons personally is that there's a lot of my love language is being of service, and the things that I studied are things that I think are the hardest for people to accept help with. They feel very personal. Um, they feel unchangeable, and and the people who've known me the longest know me as a complete shit show and hot mess, and so that's not a great resume for receiving support from in these areas. So all totally fair and valid. Not definitely not judging anybody or shaming anybody for their decisions on that, but but I need an outlet for sharing the information that's triggered and brought up in my relationships with people who are not interested in receiving um, from me. So yeah, this is a selfish video, um, but maybe I'll re-record it later with better lighting and better voice and just better everything. So, but for now, this is the first thing I'm doing in the morning, other than a bit of scrolling, and we got a sleepy bean here as well. Um, so okay, so what I wanted to talk about today is called emotion coaching, which is a term I believe coined by the attachment-based family therapy community and model, which is an incredible program if you want to dive deeper into that work and finding those therapists. It's the program adopted by Newport Academy and their mental health and residential services for adolescents and young adults. And it's used in repairing relational ruptures and harm and repairing trust between the adolescents and their caregivers in a short period of time. Insurances only give us a very short window of time to complete that family work, and it by no means solves the problems, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But it resets the trust meter to try again, and to deliberately repair trust together in your relationship moving forward. So it's pretty powerful work. But it's also kind of like a psychedelic experience or a divine, what do they call it? There's a term. Uh, yeah, this is rough brain space to be doing this, but when we have a truly life changing moment or epiphany or I can't remember what the term is, but sort of magical or divine experience. Those are moments in time to ground us into what the truth is. Everything else beyond that is the work to make our lives as close to that as we can, and that's why drugs don't last. You can't be on LSD all the time. Um, but you can have a profound experience, and then with that wisdom that you carry with you, that seed, you can grow that in the rest of your life. Um, and not that people haven't tried to be on LSD all the time, and not that microdosing doesn't work, but I'm just saying, in terms of living that living that magic day to day, it's a slog to get back, and that's how relational repair works. Um, Man, this is just the worst day for a video. There's construction across the street, and I left the door open for my cat, and it's a distracting sound. I don't know if it'll pick up on the video, but oof. Um, so I know, follow me on this thread here. I promise we're getting back to emotion coaching. So in relational repair, um, no, actually, we're going to jump to emotion coaching now, and I'll leave the rest of that because there's the slog back, and we'll get to the slog. But let's start with the repair parts. We can understand what is the euphoric, um, not always, but yeah, the profound experience of this work. The profound experience of this work is in a, let me break it down into pieces because I've talked about this before. Conflict resolution has two parts to it, two steps. Step number one, well, step number two is what we almost always think conflict resolution is, and what we often skip to as a community and a culture. Step two is resolving the issue, coming up with ideas and plans and structures and boundaries and shared understandings and systems to resolve the issue. I figure since you can't see me anyway, you'd rather see this little bean. Um, that's step two, and that's what a lot of us are used to conflict resolution being. I know you got a little gooper. Okay, we got it. There's actually a step one that's just as important as step two, and step one. Yeah, there's nothing. There's okay. Step one is fully understanding where everyone involved in the conflict, where they're coming from and what they are feeling and experiencing on their side of things. And through that, fully understanding what the conflict actually is. And this is where, you know, activism and social justice and understanding power dynamics comes in, because whoever has the inherent power, the implicit power in this dynamic, they're usually the ones who just decide and can just decide. So let's take a business relationship, like an employer to employee. The employer has the power in a situation to think that they know what the problem actually is. Let's say they assume that it's the employee's behavior or motivation or whatever. They have the space and the power to decide that they think they know what the whole problem is, and so they're going to come up with the whole solution. And the challenge with that is that usually we're wrong. That's the whole point. That's why there's conflict, is because we don't fully understand each other, and our roles and what we're doing and what we're thinking and feeling. And so ensuring a lot of times, and parent to child, this is how this works. It's the parent's responsibility to fully hold space for and understand the child first. Um, because not only are we modeling how to listen and how to validate and how to show up for that person and understanding them fully, but we are also um, repairing how many times we maybe have skipped step one. If we're a boss that consistently skips step one and jumps straight to fixing the problem, even though we haven't taken the time to fully understand what the problem is and how our employees are feeling and maybe why their motivation is lacking, that employee, their trust in that employer is just dropping rapidly. And the more we do that, less motivated the employee will be, and so on and so forth. So that's that. Um, Step one, very important, just as important as step two. What step one actually is, and what I taught when doing this with families. Step one is learning how to listen without derailing back to us and our thoughts and feelings and beliefs and opinions and making it about us. The goal is you, I am going to show up for you and allow you to feel completely heard and seen and understood before I go into my narrative at all. Because that's going to take its own work. Feeling completely seen and heard and understood is going to take its own work. And we're going to work on that intentionally. And then we can intentionally, once that's settled, we can intentionally switch over to me. And once I share what I have to share, that might trigger some more things in you. And what we'll do is we'll settle mine, make sure I feel completely seen and heard and understood, and then we'll get back to you. So that's the rough structure. What's really important in that, excuse me, what's really, really important in that is knowing how to listen, and set our things aside. So um, to setting things aside, I mean, use whatever skills you've got, whatever regulation skills you've got to stay present, counting, breathing, stretching on the floor. Like you are fully empowered to do whatever it takes to feel completely grounded, or as grounded as you can, and breathe through to get through hearing, possibly negative or challenging feedback about yourself. Take care of yourself. That's okay. Get some tea, whatever. Um, Regulating your nervous system as a part of this is actually one of the most powerful things that you can do, because you're showing that even though this is hard for you, it's worth it to be there for that person and what they're sharing. Um, the other thing that I do personally is I take notes. It allows me to really hear what the other person is saying and get their words correctly instead of my. So what you're saying is you don't really care about how I feel, or whatever my wounded interpretation might be. I can write down, I have a hard time when you um, criticize what I'm doing, and like I can write down that language instead of being like, you hate me, or whatever might come up in my system. It also helps me stay focused on them instead of making it about me. And it also helps me take notes for if I have an explanation or an understanding about myself that I would like to give later. I have that written down and I don't feel like I have to talk about it now so that I don't forget. So taking notes has really helped me. And I would do that as the family therapist for families, but you could totally do this on your own, without a therapist. Um, Not saying having a therapist isn't helpful, and certainly we can, any of this information can be used to cause more harm than good, but we're all already out here doing it raw anyway, so I figure, the risks are the same risks that we have operating without this information. Um okay, so so that's how to stay present as best as you can. Now let's get to listening. This is one of my favorite things to teach because it's so simple, and yet so, we weren't taught this. We weren't taught how, we weren't taught that we should and that we could, and how to be in a position of power and show up for someone, um, who is struggling and in need. We just weren't taught this. And I think, you know, the activist side of me thinks intentionally so. Um, but for all intents and purposes, we are here dealing with the fact that it hasn't been. So it's pretty simple. but I'll go through the basics. So step number one, sub or step A, subsection of step one of conflict resolution, subsection A. And this is I'm doing my own version of this. This is not the official emotion coaching methodology of ABFT. I've modified it to what has resonated the most with the families that I worked with and in my own work with myself and relationships in my life, which, you know, coming off of a pretty rough breakup at the moment with someone that tried to do this repair work with, and I fucked up. I we did step one, but we didn't do step two, and our relationship really hurt for it. And now it's over and feeling very like, man, I could have done more, and I could have done more, and I feel sad that I didn't, but here we are. So I was trying to be a member of the relationship and the therapist, and that's just messy. So I'm not beating myself up over it, but it's also sad and feels sort of like lost potential. But anyway, excuse me. Okay. So, um, we tried to get a therapist, but none of them responded. Were very full, which I get as a therapist. It takes me a long time to get back to new potential client inquiries because it's a lot. Um, anyway, so emotion coaching. So subsection A of step one is yeah, is set the scene. So we want as the one initiating, as the one in power, um, and even as the one maybe with less power initiating. Um, one of the if you've got someone in power that you're trying to work with and they are in an egoic state where they're not receptive to having these conversations, you can bite the bullet and I don't know if I really fully understand what that term is. I've just heard my parents say that. So you can submit yourself, unfortunately. I mean, it sucks to do already knowing that you're in a position of disempowerment, but you can do this process from the position of power, because you are technically, in knowing this information and how to do trust repair, and in your confidence that the other person doesn't know this information, you are in a position of power of that. You're not in everything else, but in guiding this process, you would be. So you can take this information and do the same. Um, Weird little hack. Um, so all of that, and power imbalances are messy, and there can be many conflicting ones happening all at once too. So anyway, all of that to say, anybody can initiate this process. Um, Subsection A is setting the scene. Setting the scene can mean things like um, choosing a neutral place for having the conversation. We want to pick somewhere that doesn't feel like the home ground. Definitely for the person in power and the person initiating this, like come into my office, already putting the person on edge. Hey, 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 he's coming in nice and peaceful and kind and purring and not in battle mode. You okay, man? You want some movie? We could have got a cuddle puddle. If you're in battle mode, you can go be in play mode, and I'll be here. Um, you do look like you're in play mode now. Hmm. Neutral ground of some kind. Or if you really want to be successful, pick their powerful ground. So if it's your child, off sit in with them in their bedroom. Um, their position of power where they would feel the most safe and comfortable because we're asking them to open up and be vulnerable with feedback. that might trigger us into our worst states and probably has triggered us into our worst states. So we're asking them to trust us that we are going to not use. It really smells like one of the kittens pooped on something. Hey, did you fart? Was it a big fart right in my face as I'm losing track of my thoughts? It'd be pretty effective. Okay. Um, whew, whew, whew. Let's see if we can make this a little better. Oh yeah. Good morning. Good morning, me. Okay. Subsection A. Setting the scene, being in either a neutral ground or their place of power and safety and feeling secure. Um, and it could be a place of their choosing. If you don't know what that is, don't guess. Don't guess. Assumptions really do make asses out of all of us. Um, Ask, hey, I really want to have an important conversation with you. Where would you feel the most safe, comfortable, secure having this conversation? For some people, it might be virtually. Might be, yeah, I'd really love a Zoom call to have some emotional distance and safety. It might be over FaceTime. I wouldn't, well, yeah, you could better to try it via texting than not at all. But I think there's something, if it can be had live, there's something really powerful about that. Um, so anyway, set the scene that way, choosing the place, um, and how it's going to happen. Uh, then there's how we show up in the space. It's really, really, really important. So do whatever you need to do to show up as calm and regulated as you can. When we are in a position of power, whether this is a parent-child situation or not, we are triggering, embodying, projecting, playing out patterns from childhood because childhood, infancy through whenever we leave the home, it is a state of disempowerment. It's a state of dependency and disempowerment. And so we are the likelihood of triggering someone's wounding there, whether this is really parent to child right now or not, is so high. Um and we don't even know where those landmines are uh, as the parent or as someone else. And so maybe please don't step on the laptop. Thank you. And so ideally, um, that dynamic, one of the most important things is actually not what we say, but how we are. When we are modeling, projecting, embodying that dynamic, staying regulated is the best thing that we can do. Hi, Mama Bean. Yeah. Because we are co-regulating for them. So if we stay calm, they have the freedom to be stressed, be emotional, be vulnerable, go into their feelings, go in. They have the freedom to do that while we stay calm. Just like a little kid on the playground, they have the freedom to leave and go play and scratch their knee and fall over, and they're going to look at us and see if we're going, nice job, or oh, it's not that bad, or how's your knee, and we stay regulated. If we're freaking out, they're freaking out. So we're staying regulated. And do whatever it takes for you to do that. Go have a hike. Go, whatever you need to do that day in preparation for this repair work to get yourself centered and grounded, or as centered and grounded as you can get. Make that a priority. It's just as important as all of the rest of the work that you're going to do. So being regulated. Maintaining regulation in the session or in the meeting is also really, really important. Bring what you might need to do that, if that's a fidget or note taking or tea or kittens or whatever it takes to keep you there, imagining that you're going to be fed a whole bunch of the worst times of yourself and remembering that, um and people that you really care about feeling negative feelings about you, bring that, bring whatever is going to help you do that. Ideally not substances, because um, if it, as a therapist, there was a lot of fear from the teenagers, from the adolescents, that their parents were going to say all the right things in that session just because the therapist was there and not really mean it and not really stick to it long term. Vice versa, the parents had a lot of fears of that as well. Later, when we got to the resolving and coming up with boundaries and rules thing, they thought, yeah, the kids are just going to come and agree and then really not do it. Um, Being on a substance to help you stay present is a great way to really question how real that is. And not for you, maybe you really felt the feelings and were really present even while on the substance, but the other person, it's like, so you were able to say all that stuff while you were on that thing, but like, how often are you going to be on that thing? So just keep that in mind. Not that you can't use some CBD or something to stay calm, but or more. I what you know. Everybody's got their own circumstance, but be very intentional about it. And they do know. They Even if they don't know what you're on, your kids know. Your kids know you better than most of the time we know ourselves. The people who are disempowered know the people in power really well because they've had to learn how we work to survive, to to not ask us big questions on our bad days, to know when to, you know, go to the bathroom and not get in trouble. Yeah, it just, they've learned to read us to be okay. So, all of that. Um, Part of setting the scene and how you show up. Okay, there's how you show up internally and being regulated and being present. There's where we show up, but there's also how we show up externally, our body language. And so regulating internally has a big impact on that, but how we show up externally can be really, really powerful. So I'm going to give a couple tips to that, and then I might take a pause because I think I might be running out of steam. But this is fun. This is definitely nourishing the part of me that wants to talk about this stuff and lost the opportunity to do so in my romantic relationship because I just panic ended it. And I don't think there's any coming back from that, unfortunately, with this person. So Um, we can know all of this stuff. The stuff is in our cerebral cortex. It's in the part of our brain that thinks and knows and plans and all of that. But when we get triggered, that cerebral cortex literally goes offline. The neural connections between that part of the brain, our personality, what we know, who we are, everything we've learned, literally disconnects from the amygdala, the part of our brain that does fight, flight, freeze, and has learned to respond to crises from age 0 to 7. However, you learned how to respond to crisis from 0 to 7. It's what lives in here. And that becomes completely disconnected. All of the neural connections, all the electricity that passes between those two stops. And we are operating just from this. And so, as a therapist, I can be a really shitty partner when I'm disconnected because there's a reason I became a therapist. It's because of everything that lives in here. And I'm doing work to improve in here, EMDR and other things, improve that relationship and do better. But man, when I don't do better, it's rough. And I feel for everybody who's ever been in a relationship with me or is still in a relationship with me of any kind, because oof. Um, so anyway, this is helping. And I hope it helps one person, anybody. It's at least helping one person. I am being helped by getting to get this stuff out. So, and people in my life not feeling condescended or patronized or talked down to or insulted by this. So, okay. So there's what space we show up in. There's how we show up internally in our regulation so we can co-regulate with the person to allow them to feel safe enough to dysregulate as they go into their vulnerable narrative of what's been going on for them. so they can share what's really what their understanding of the problem is. Um, and then there's how we show up externally, and how we show up externally is our body language. And so a really important step that we can take, step number one, is positioning ourselves lower at their level or lower than them, and maintaining that as long as our intention in this space is for them to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to share what their understanding of things is, and to understand them better. As long as that is our intention, we want to maintain that body posture. Now, if the situation becomes unsafe for any reason, and check yourself. Someone being animated and emotional and big with their energy and angry is not unsafe. If that's triggering you in a wound from childhood where you felt unsafe in those places, it's your work. And you can write on your notepad, they are very mad, and do what you need to regulate yourself. But as they're not making threats, they're not pulling out weapons and things like that, like, you are safe. Anger is safe. It's safe for people to experience anger. That is okay. Actually, it's safer for them to experience anger. It's when we repress that shit that it becomes dangerous. So you are safer letting them experience anger and being with them in that. So just keep an eye on that, especially for those of us who are privileged and in positions of power. People feeling angry about that dynamic or angry about how we've treated them is extremely valid and not a risk. So, and it doesn't mean you can't stop things if things are becoming insulting or cruel. Um, but be really intentional about determining what is safety or not, because we those of us in positions of privilege and power throw around feeling unsafe in a way that, if you could see the whole situation and how unsafe that other person is, it's fucking laughable. And I say that really hoping that hits home. It's embarrassingly wrong, and it's sad because the other person is probably significantly more unsafe on a day-to-day basis than we might be in that moment. So, anyway, all of that to say, it can go a long way. If your child is sitting on their bed having a really hard time opening up to you and having a hard time feeling safe, sit on the floor. You can sit on the bed beside them. You can sit on the floor. I always sit on the floor with teenagers because the power dynamic there is so different. They are looking down on us when we've always been looking down on them. And not meaning like we look down on them, like we think less of them, but that's physically, that is the dynamic, and we are giving them that power. We are saying, I am here for you to share, and I am here to listen and be of service to you and your needs right now. So sitting at, or at least at, but ideally below their level. If they sit in the chair, you sit on the couch. If they sit on the couch, you sit on the floor. Whatever that looks like. Another big part of that is our eye contact. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul. 100%. We feel, when someone is looking us in the eyes, we feel seen. And when we are going through something vulnerable and painful, we might not want to be seen so intently. The spotlight, especially of our parent who knows us better than we know ourselves, knows us better than anybody else, or someone in power who has the ability to, if they see weakness in us, decide that we're not good enough for the job, or if they see, how angry we are, they might sick HR on us, or the police, or there's so much risk in being seen when you're in a disempowered state, or just at all as a human being. We have so many ways to lock up, um, medicate, uh, disenfranchise, harm. Um, most of us are in a state where if we lose our job, we are homeless. We don't have contingencies for that. So just the gravitas of, and as a teenager especially, as these are the first times that these people as a human being on this planet are experiencing these emotions. The very first time they're experiencing heartbreak, the very first time they're experiencing empowerment with their parent, the very first time they're experiencing this is the first time they're experiencing this exact mixture of emotions, and they're experiencing themselves and how they react to that mixture of emotions based on ancestors and generations and their parents, and they don't have that self-awareness yet. This is big. It's a lot to see ourselves through our parents' eyes and our behavior. It's such a big moment. That's why their feelings are so massive, because it's all new. And we're going to stare at them while they go through that and notice how they twitch and how they move. And so one of the greatest things that we can do is avert our eyes. And it doesn't mean we're not still watching them. Peripheral vision is extremely effective. It's why kids, anybody, opens up the most when we're on a car ride, because we're not watching. It's the person driving gets to focus on the road, and the other person's kind of focusing on the road, and we can have a conversation with our peripheral vision, seeing our body language and understanding and interpreting, but we're not locked in the gaze of analysis and being extremely seen while we're trying to be vulnerable. So it was a lot, but I'm hoping it makes sense. Like understanding the gravitas, the intensity, I don't even know if I'm using that word right. Understanding how difficult it is to be vulnerable and how much more difficult it is to do that when we're under a microscope, and honoring that by I just look at their shoes, or I look, and you can learn the pattern of when they're ready for you to look at them or not, and you'll pick up on it. If they're feeling shutting down, look away. If they're opening up, value that and honor that and give them some attention, and like, wow, and then go back to writing or looking somewhere else. It's really powerful. So how you show up in the space, internally and externally, what the space is, being within their power and control, and the maximum empowerment for them. Um, yeah, I'm going to leave it there today because I'm really hungry. And I need to go get eggs if I'm going to make the yummy oatmeal that I want this morning. So, um, thank you for this. Just for everyone that has ever been vulnerable on the internet, either intentionally or unintentionally, thank you. Because I need this. My grieving heart, my broken heart needs this. Um, all of the parts of me that care about the people in my life, um, and what I've studied, what I've become really good at, and what my love language is, are things that I predominantly can't use with them. And to be fair, I came in as a white hot savior complex for a number of years, so people's reticence is completely valid. It's not that they should let me, but I have a lot of pent up feelings and information. So thank you to everyone who has shown that this is possible, and for anyone who sees this, thank you. Um, and at least it's helping me, bare minimum. So I don't have a goodbye tagline, so be well.